where faith, culture, and politics collide. This is Give Me Liberty Media. This is the Tyler Morgan Show on Relentless Daring Media Network. Welcome back to Land of Bourbon and Bad Decisions. This is the Tyler Morgan Show live on twitch.tv/Tyler Morgan Show, or maybe check this out later on YouTube, youtube.com/@the Tyler Morgan Show. I don't know why I have the at or the, but hey, that's YouTube's rules. So hey, I play their game the way they want me to play it. Oh, or maybe you're checking this out on a podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts. I want to say Stitcher. I don't think Stitcher's around anymore, but you can find me on Spotify, anything Amazon related. So Amazon Music, Audible, all that. You can find me on Pandora, iHeart, all the places. If you can find a podcast there, you can probably find my show. Check it out. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And on the YouTubes, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and like this video. All right, before I get into all the wild, wacky news of the week, I need to talk to you about one of my favorite partners, and that would be Blue Collar Beardsman. Blue Collar Beardsman is a homegrown beard oil company. That's how I keep my facial mane looking all nice. How I keep the hair on my face soft, supple, keeps the skin underneath from itching, and it provides a good conditioner for your beard. Check them out. They have a great lineup of scents, and you can subscribe. And with the monthly subscription, you get a a scent of the month. Everything that they do special for every month. They had a kind of a really summery smell for 4th of July. They'll do like hot cocoa and peppermint in the wintertime. There's a lot of great scents. Check them out. One of my favorites is the After Hours. Gets a little hint of bourbon, a little hint of cigar tobacco, like the not the burned cigar smell, but if you get a brand new cigar out of the box and give it a sniff and smell the tobacco, those are the scents they go for. So many great scents. And you also get merchandise. You can get combs, so you can keep everything brushed out so it's not all knotted up and nappy. Lots of great stuff. Check them out. A small business, ran by a guy who also owns his own heating and air conditioning system. I mean, that's the level of take care of blue collar workers they are, because they are in fact blue collar workers. BlueCollarBeardsman.com. All righty, so tonight's episode, Tim Walz, A Portrait in Courage. And by A Portrait in Courage, I and a lot of veterans have had a number of questions about his military service. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not going to denigrate the man for 24 years in the National Guard. And for the most part, it sounds like it was a successful 24-year career. No major discipline issues, stuff like that. But the question lies less in the character of his service and more in the timing of his retirement. You see, he retired in 2005, and this is after in 2001, 9/11 happened. And I don't know if it was before or after 9/11 that he reenlisted, but in 2001, he reenlisted on a 6-year contract. okay, cool. Because National Guard does not do indefinite reenlistments like active duty. So he has a 6-year contract, which would take him up to 2007. Alrighty. And in 2003, he was notified that he was on being sent to USASMA, United States Army Sergeant Major Academy. And with the National Guard, it's like 740 hours of coursework, basically 2 years of coursework. And upon completing the coursework, you have a 2 year or a 2 week stint at the actual USASMA at Fort Bliss, Texas, the actual schoolhouse portion. Well, and he received a conditional promotion, and the conditional promotion, there's three parts to it. Number one, you will complete the coursework. And upon completion of the coursework, you have a 2-year, 24-month mandatory time in service upon completing the school. Or if you went as a first sergeant or a master sergeant and completed the 2 years of school and then the academy portion, once you get promoted and you actually have the rank on your chest as a sergeant major or a command sergeant major, you have to hold that position for 2 years upon completion or promotion, whatever happens later. Well, he was promoted and then got the and then started the schoolwork portion. Okay, cool. But here's where it gets kind of iffy. Early in the spring of 2005, a number of units, including Tim Walz's 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery, received a warning order stating that the unit would deploy. Okay. Yeah, I've never been that high up in a guard unit, but every unit gets a warno. Using Army lingo there because it's shorter and makes more sense to my brain. So every unit gets warnos all the time. Hey, just a heads up, you will be doing this eventually. At the lower level, in Afghanistan, hey, in 2 days we have this mission coming up. Start figuring out what you're going to need and getting it together. That's what a warning order is for, to prepare for an upcoming mission, deployment, whatever. Start getting ducks in a row. That way units can schedule, what they call a belt line, where you can go through and you can do an administrative review on records, make sure DD 93s, SGLI, stuff like that is up to date, because soldiers get married, soldiers get divorced. So you have to go through and make sure this paperwork is up to date. So if a unit receives a warno, it's a good opportunity to go, hey, we're going to get the battalion S1 set up and we're going to start going through all this. That way we have it in order before we actually begin to mobilize. And one of the things about that, like I said, this is early in spring. It was in March. In fact, I actually had to go to the Tim Walz for Congress webpage in the Wayback Machine to find this article that was released. So dated on March 20th. Now, the article states on Thursday, March 17th, the National Guard Public Affairs Office announced a possible partial mobilization of roughly 2,000 troops from the Minnesota National Guard. First District congressional candidate Tim Walz currently holds the rank of Command Sergeant Major in the 1st of the 125th Battalion. Pardon me, which is based in New Ulm and largely composed of men and women from southern Minnesota. The announcement from the National Guard PAO specified that all or a portion of Walz's battalion could be mobilized to serve in Iraq within the next 2 years. Okay. So, like I said, sometime in the next 2 years. And considering that he had done a 6-year contract extension in 2001, that puts it through 2007, which, theoretically, he would have time to deploy because of the rotation and all that. Walz, who teaches global geography at Mankato West High School, has been an active member of the National Guard since 1981. He has previously been deployed during his 23 years in the National Guard, including an 8-month deployment during Operation Enduring Freedom. That deployment, he went to Italy, I believe Aviano, where his unit provided force security to help bolster the security of the Air Force Base. Which, again, there are some who would use something like that to go, oh, you didn't do a redeployment. I mean, the National Guard, he was sent for an extended period of time from his family, whether it was in Kuwait, whether it was, providing, again, force protection measures for Diego Garcia, for Aviano, for 173rd's base in Vicenza. Whatever the case is, he deployed. It was less of a combat deployment. It was more of an operational deployment. Like when I went to Korea in 2014, it was not a combat deployment. It was an operational deployment. So, so you can make the argument that, okay, it wasn't a combat deployment. You don't get your former wartime service badge, whatever. It's cool. Slick sleeves don't bother me. Everyone has a job. He did the job that he was assigned and that his unit was assigned on that previous deployment. So I'm not gonna bash him on that. The Army said, "Here's what you're doing," and they did it. So again, not trying to bash him on that. Not doing it. But when he was asked about possible deployment to Iraq, this is where I start throwing red flags out. That's about possible deployment to Iraq. Walz said, "I do not yet know if my artillery unit will be part of this mobilization, and I am unable to comment further on the specifics of the deployment." Although his tour of duty in Iraq might coincide with his campaign for Minnesota's first congressional seat, Walz is determined to stay in the race. Quote, "As Command Sergeant Major, I have a responsibility not only to ready my battalion for Iraq, but also to serve if called on. I am dedicated to serving my country to the best of my ability, whether that is in Washington, D.C. or in Iraq. I don't want to speculate on what shape my campaign will take if I am deployed, but I have no plans to drop out of the race. I am fortunate to have a strong group of enthusiastic supporters and a very dedicated and intelligent wife. Both will be a major part of my campaign, whether I am in Minnesota or Iraq." End quote. That was in March. of 2025, in March of 2025, he was acknowledging that, yeah, I may have to deploy. But something funny happened on the way to the deployment. Before the unit received its actual mobilization orders in May of 2025, a mere 2 months after that interview was done, he magically caught a retirement. Now, I don't know for sure because I've never been an M-Day, just the regular 1 week in a month soldier in the National Guard that has been in it long enough to retire. I do not know if there is a retirement packet that you can drop and it takes a couple months and then boom, you're out. I don't know if that's the case. But seeing as how apparently there's no indefinite reenlistments in the National Guard, one would think if he planned on retiring, he would complete this deployment, which they deployed in 2006. By the time they actually got around to it, which he would have still had a year left. But if he had already completed the original portion of, or the remote portion of the Sergeant Major's Academy, and was just waiting on going to the schoolhouse, which who knows, maybe he would have had that done and gone to the schoolhouse and done the in-person portion at USASMA, then he would have still done, if he had that done 2005, he would have had just go do a short extension. That way he would get the retirement benefits of a command sergeant major. But instead, he chose not to. He decided that he was going to opt out the last 2 years of his contract. Again, I don't know how you would do that. I mean, and a lot of people are pointing to, well, look, he didn't even do all the paperwork. He didn't even go around for it because, it says soldier not available for signature. Well, I have an NGB 22, National Guard Bureau Form 22, that is from January 2010. And if you would like to, anyone who's listening who doesn't like me, who thinks I'm blowing smoke, you can do a FOIA request on me through the Missouri National Guard to get a copy of my NGB Form 22 that was issued in January of 2010. And you will see that mine also says soldier not available for signature. You know why I wasn't available for signature in January of 2010? Early February 2010? Do you know why? Because I was attending infantry OSIT at Fort Benning, I guess now Fort Moore, Georgia. I was in infantry school because I went active duty. I was granted a conditional release pending me shipping out to go active duty. And that's what happened. I came down my active duty orders. I reported to MEPS as required, flew to Georgia, and went to school. Scanned a copy of my orders, sent them to my battalion S1, who then went about ensuring that I was properly separated from the guard. Like I said, leaving the guard early, you can have a number of reasons. You can be a single parent and not have a family care plan and just, I don't have a family care plan, you got to kick me out. Okay, cool. You can get out early to attend job training if they have that program in place in your state's guard system. I said there's a number of reasons. But when you imply as you're running for Congress that, well, if I have to deploy, then I have to deploy, and then turn around and just slip out the back door, it really leads me to ask the questions, are you a coward? Were you afraid that something might happen to you on your what could end up being your last big hoorah with the military? I mean, and that's a fair question. I mean, my first active duty deployment, my first guard deployment, well, technically only guard deployment, but when I went to Iraq in 2003, I asked the question, is something bad going to happen the first time I'm ever deployed? Because it wouldn't be the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. When I went to Afghanistan in 2011, is something going to happen to me? Because from what I'm hearing, where we're going is not exactly chill. It's not fully the wild, wild west. Like some of the guys who I deployed with, who had their last deployment in 2009, 2008, 2009, that ballpark was the Korengal freaking Valley, the Valley of freaking Death. Those guys know what the wild, wild west was. And while it was not, oh my God, people are getting shot and killed every day, it was still a kinetic environment where we were outside the wire almost every day. You know, you have a 9-day patrol cycle that consists of 3 days of tower guard to, refit. That's when you get your chance to, get plenty of rest, go to the gym, ensure weapons maintenance is caught up, all these things. You got 3 days of that. And then you have 6 days of patrol. If you're hearing the squawking in the background, I apologize. My producer Wrigley is getting very mad at me for whatever reason. Or somebody has walked into the kitchen and he's trying to get their attention. The joys of having a foul-mouthed producer. But back to Timmy Poo. See, I cannot wrap my head around the whole idea that Tim would just opt out the last second. Because I've known sergeants major who had over 20 years in service that in active duty in the National Guard, when they got put in charge of a unit, well, in charge, they took responsibility of the unit. They were excited to do the workup with their troops. They were excited to deploy with their troops. Sergeant Major Tannheiser, oh my God, I love this man. Still to this day, he is retired. And we're still friends on Facebook because that is the leader he was. He would go and spend several days at a time with the different companies deployed around Afghanistan, our area of operations in Afghanistan, to that way he would know what's going on with the troops. I don't know how many zombie movies and Diet Cokes were watched and consumed with this man. He's a great guy. We loved him. he had well over 20 years in. He could have retired, but he chose not to. When I deployed in 2016, our squadron sergeant major, again, over 20 years, he could have been like, well, yeah, I'm your sergeant major, but I'm going to retire. No. He oversaw a squadron change of command that brought the squadron commander that we had for the deployment in. We came back and he oversaw the squadron change of command for the next commander coming in. He went with his troops. He made the rounds and visited with the troops. That's what sergeants major do. Because from day one as an NCO, you live by the creed of the non-commissioned officer. And Tim, Governor Walz, I'm sorry, but I don't see how, well, I'm running for Congress. It's going to be really hard to run for Congress and deploy at the same time. I don't see how that is living up to the creed of the non-commissioned officer. And it is, like I said, this is our bread and butter. This is something that we had to memorize, and we said all the time before we did anything in Warrior Leader course. The creed of the non-commissioned officer. No one is more professional than I. I am a non-commissioned officer, a leader of soldiers. As a non-commissioned officer, I realize that I am a member of a time-honored corps, which is known as the backbone of the Army. I am proud of the Corps of Non-Commissioned Officers and will at all times conduct myself so as to bring credit upon the Corps, the military service, and my country, regardless of the situation in which I find myself. I will not use my grade or position to attain pleasure, profit, or personal safety. Competence is my watchword. My two basic responsibilities will always be uppermost in my mind: accomplishment of my mission and the welfare of my soldiers. I will strive to remain tactically and technically proficient. I am aware of my role as a non-commissioned officer. I will fulfill my responsibilities inherent in that role. All soldiers are entitled to outstanding leadership. I will provide that leadership. I know my soldiers, and I will always place their needs above my own. I will communicate consistently with my soldiers and never leave them uninformed. I will be fair and impartial in recommending both rewards and punishment. Officers in my unit will have maximum time to accomplish their duties. They will not have to accomplish mine. I will earn the respect and confidence as well as that of my soldiers. I will be loyal to those with whom I serve, seniors, peers, and subordinates alike. I will exercise initiative by taking appropriate action in the absence of orders. I will not compromise my integrity nor my moral courage. I will not forget, nor will I allow my comrades to forget, that we are professionals, non-commissioned officers, leaders. Tim Walz, you threw every damn word of that creed out the window. Every word of it. You were not responsible for your soldiers. You were not responsible for the accomplishment of your mission. Hell, you couldn't even finish Command Sergeant Major Academy. So you went to Congress. And then you became governor, and holy crap. Let's talk about your record as governor, Tim Walz. And you want to be next in line for the friggin' presidency? You, a 24-year veteran of the Minnesota National Guard, when your capital was burning to the freaking ground, And people were asking about sending the National Guard in to quell the riots. What did you say, Tim? What did you say about your former soldiers, Tim? Oh, they're just 19-year-old cooks. You know, what do they know? Really, Tim? Last I checked, looking at your service record, you enlisted as an infantryman, served as an artilleryman. Really? That's a 19-year-old cook, Tim Walz? That's a 19-year-old cook. I have seen National Guard guys who they suck at life when deployed. I've seen it. I have seen National Guard troops ready to kill to the last freaking man. Tim. But no. You can have floods. Those 19-year-old cooks are perfectly damn suited to fill sandbags and put along the Mississippi River when it's trying to overflow its banks. But when rioters are out in the streets, you don't trust them to protect property, Tim? You don't trust them to ensure order is restored, Tim? Why the hell should any troop trust you in Washington freaking D.C.? If you're just going to look at them and go, it's a bunch of 19-year-old cooks. Tim Walz, you are a freaking disgrace. You are a disgrace to my uniform, Tim. Yeah, you did it for 24 years. I was in the National Guard for 8.5. Then I went active duty for 7.5. You know what, Tim? I would trust even the worst drug-addled, suicidal soldier in a position of leadership in this country before I would trust you. Because you turned your back on your own men. Sure, you also came out and said in 2018, when Command Sergeant Major retired, Barons, and one of his fellow retired Command Sergeants Major wrote a letter questioning your service or questioning the timing of your retirement when you first ran for governor, Tim. And you came out and said, these are the accusations made by guys who never served. Never freaking served, Tim. Last time I checked, Command Sergeant Major Barons is the guy who replaced you because you dropped the F out. God, it is so hard to stop myself from swearing on this. Speaking in the full language of my infantry brethren. Ugh. You accuse the guy who wrote you several times while you were in Congress. The guy that replaced you. You say things like, well, this is just a guy who's never worn the uniform. Bitch, please. I will stack my DD-214 up against your NGB-22. I will go find my NGB-22 and I'll stack up on yours. And you can tell me I've never worn the damn uniform, that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And you expect veterans to want to vote for you. You expect veterans to want to, throw in with the guy who they can't trust to lead a group of school kids across the damn road without a riot taking them out. A guy whose own wife, during the riots of 2020, would leave the windows to the governor's mansion up because, and by the way, Timmy Poo released his financial statements. He owns no property. The only residence he has is the governor's mansion of Minnesota. It's almost like he plans on just living off the people until he can't anymore. Sure, he may buy his own groceries at his expense or send someone to buy groceries at his expense, but why should he have to pay property taxes on a place he's not going to live because I have the governor's mansion? I have the Naval Observatory. I don't have to own a piece of property. Oh, screw you, Tim. Tim, your wife would leave the windows open on the governor's mansion so she could smell the tires burning. This is the same Tim who pointed out that one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. Really, Tim? How neighborly is it when someone comes in at gunpoint and says, your crap now belongs to the state. Your crap now belongs to the people. And then they confiscate it from you, Tim. Does that sound very freaking neighborly, Tim? How neighborly is it when you central plan everything around you to the point where it leads to the starvation of tens of millions of people? Tim, tell me, Tim, how did that work out for China? How did that work out for Ukraine in the 1930s? Or are you just another Walter Dranny-like simp that's like, well, that did what socialism done right? No. When millions of people keep dying over and over and over again, no matter who is trying to implement the socialism, Tim, that is not a fault of the people trying to implement it. That is a feature of the program that is socialism. Tim. But again, what do I know? I only spent 16 years in. I wasn't a 24-year sergeant major. I've never had to lead troops ever in my life, except for those times when I was a non-commissioned officer. That one time when, as a specialist E4, I was leading combat patrols in Afghanistan as a way to groom me for leadership, not just in the rear, not just in the field during training. Actual people's lives are at stake, and I'm leading them. But Tim, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this, Tim, because it just causes me to ask so many questions. Now, maybe, if you had been up front from the start, Tim, and you'd come out and said, hey, you know what? I love the National Guard. I really do. But I'm running for Congress. And I know there are ways that I can still run for Congress and serve in the Guard, even with the upcoming deployment. However, I do not want to take away from my troops. I do not want my troops to think that I'm putting this congressional run over them. So it is with a heavy heart that I'm going to resign from my post as Command Sergeant Major. I understand that I will be taking a demotion in order to do this. And I'm going to be retiring from the National Guard so that I can focus on my congressional run. And we're going to find a great sergeant major who's going to take you all the way. Tim, if you had done that, if that had been the whole thing from the get-go, then maybe I wouldn't have so many freaking questions. But Tim, the thing is, when you just pop smoke and you're gone. There's things that don't happen. There's not a change of responsibility. I'm not just talking about the ceremony where the outgoing sergeant major gives a speech, the incoming sergeant major gives a speech, they go stand out and they pass the guidon around and looking all cool and all that. All the dog and pony show up. There's more than that, Tim. There's no left seat, right seat where your replacement, whether it was going to be Sergeant Major Barons or somebody else, pardon me, where they come in and you take them to the different companies or field artillery, the different batteries within the battalion and say, hey, here's First Sergeant so-and-so and Captain so-and-so. Where you go around, you introduce them. There's no, hey, they're doing these inventories to make sure that when you come in as the command sergeant major, you will be 100% up to date on the equipment we have, things we're short on, things that are on order, the maintenance issues that are being worked on, that are being worked out. You didn't do any of that. One day you're there in March, and then in May you're not. There was never any full statement from you, Tim, on why you're dropping, why you were leaving your unit after you got a warno. Because to the average person, to the average veteran, the average soldier, pardon me, who sees that, yes, it is your prerogative after 20 years to retire. But when you do not address it, you just disappear. It makes it really hard to believe it was anything other than, I'm scared. I mean, I suppose serving in Congress is less scary than combat. I guess it's easy to sign a bill that puts tampons in boys' bathrooms. I suppose it's easier than going to Iraq to sign bills that allow illegal aliens to get driver's licenses. But, Tim, life is not about what is easier and what is harder. Life is about rising to the occasion. Life is about meeting challenges head on. I know a thing or two about that, Tim. When the average infantry recruit is 19, 20 years old, and you're 26 years old, you already have a combat deployment under your belt. You have a lifetime of hard manual labor going into it. Your knees are already starting to go. Your back is having issues already. And you go to infantry school and you're behind the physical impairment 8-ball. I know what it's like to rise to the occasion. I know what it's like to go to a war zone going, I have no clue what's going to happen the first time I have to pull the trigger. And then when you get there, you're cackling like a madman because there's a dude with an AK and you've got a machine gun, and the sweet, sweet smell of cordite as that gun starts talking with the other machine guns. watching the bullet splash into the wall around the window where the dumbass is shooting at you from. That is an accomplishment you'll never have in this world as a civilian, Tim. I know that because it's a challenge that I arose to. And this whole idea that, well, I can't run for Congress and be in the Guard. I know it's a few years after your time, but Tulsi freaking Gabbard, man. She ran for, I mean, she served in her state house. She was a mayor. She was a congresswoman, all while serving in the Guard. She's a lieutenant colonel of a National Guard unit or reserve unit, one of the two that has drill sergeants that do 2 weeks of drill sergeanting. Angry Cops had a video on this earlier today. And she's actually battalion commander in his division now. So, I mean, it can be done. Granted, in 2020, when she was running for president, she put her presidential campaign, she paused her campaign to go do a 2-week annual training. It can be done, Tim. You could have managed to do it. And more than likely, if you had the support and the momentum behind you, you could have submitted the proper paperwork because there's a DOD directive concerning National Guard and reservists running for political office, especially if they're going to get, deployed. Again, if you had gone through that route and it worked out with the Minnesota National Guard, hey, you're going to take over as the command sergeant major for this unit, and this command sergeant major or this master sergeant's going to take your spot. That way, this deployment's not going to get in the way of your congressional run. You know what? People would have understood that. They would have. They'd been like, damn, man, look at that. Especially come out and give some speech about how you really regret you're not going to be leading your troops into combat, blah, 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 blah. But you're ensuring they're taken care of, and they're going to have great leadership who's going to ensure they're taken care of. If you'd done that, dear God, Tim, would anyone say a damn thing? No, they wouldn't. They'd be like, wow, look at that. He's makes sure his guys are taken care of before he goes and continues on his run for Congress. But you didn't do that. You didn't. You snuck out the back door. Probably left all of your TA-50 in, with your supply sergeant, say, hey, send me a bill for anything I'm missing. And just dipped out. I have had some crap-tabulous leaders in my time in the military. Guys are just toxic as all hell. But even with all their faults, with personalities that you just scream, I should not be in leadership. One damn thing is for sure. Never once did they fail to ensure their troops were taken care of. Never once did they fail to have their troops ready at a moment's notice for anything. They could have been the most worthless, piss poor person in the world. But when push came to shove, they were there for their troops. But you ran for higher office. But you couldn't be bothered to even walk anyone through finding you a replacement. You could not be bothered to make sure everyone knew where you stood with them. Where make sure they knew where they stood with you. You came out and you said some nice things that really led people to think that, oh, you're actually going to deploy. But when push came to shove, at the end of the day, you didn't. You let your men down. You turned your back and you walked away. You say it was to serve the people of your district. But really, Tim, were you being the bigger man, were you being the leader, serving your district? Or were you more concerned that you would end up losing out on a chance for power? Because we know teachers, school teachers don't have a lot of power. And a command sergeant major only has a very limited amount of power within his squadron, within his battalion, within his brigade or division. They only have so much power, but was the quest for power through Congress more important than the men and women of the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery? Or were you just too damn scared once you got that warno? Because, hey, deploying to an air base in Italy, that's not bad. But actually going to where there's a real element of danger, because mortars, rockets, green on blue attacks, which really weren't that much of a thing at that point, IEDs on the roadways, were those bigger than the mission of leading your troops? And I can't help but think that, yeah, I think the fear of that was bigger than leading your troops. And believe me, people have been posting pictures of Command Sergeant Barons helping carry a body bag that had one of those troops to the medevac so that way his body could be returned home to his loved ones. And I'm not saying that it should have been you. It should never be any leader having to carry one of his troops' bodies. But it is an honor. I have carried wounded Afghans, those security partners we had. I have carried them to medevac birds. It is an honor to carry them. No one wants to. No one wants to carry those wounded men to the helicopters. No one wants to carry those dead soldiers to the helicopter. No one wants to send an American mom and dad's child home to them in a bag. I wouldn't wish that on you, Tim. But at the same time, I would love to be able to take you on a time machine back to one of those days in Afghanistan where that young man's body was being loaded up, take you back there and just grab a hold of your head like Tom Hanks grabbing a hold, like his character grabbing Percy Wetmore's head after he set Edouard Delacroix's body on fire in the electric chair, and just hold your face and say, look at it. Not because you're responsible, but because it is a horrible thing that maybe your presence may or may not have affected, but it is a pain that you have worked away to absolutely avoid at all costs. And instead, you put somebody else there to have to be able to shoulder that burden. Tim, there's veterans out there saying they're going to vote for you because, oh, JD Vance, he was a combat cameraman. Yeah, but you know what? JD Vance, the Marine, as a combat cameraman, as a combat correspondent, he went when he was called. He admits that, yeah, he didn't face combat. He didn't face any actual combat at Al Assad Air Base. I knew guys in Afghanistan who didn't see combat once, other than the random mortar coming in. But they were there. When Uncle Sam made that phone call, they were there. Uncle Sam told you, hey, you're going to be getting a phone call eventually. Be ready. And you said, nope, somebody else get the phone. And dropped a little GTFO and gone. And I find it despicable and disgusting. You couldn't even face leaving them like a man and tell them you just did, just left. Good luck to you and God bless. That's going to wrap up the show. Whoo! Man, I had other things I was going to talk about, but damn, this whole Tim Walz thing got me worked up. Didn't expect to go almost a full hour on it. Well, those of you who listen to the podcast and listen to the whole thing or watching this on YouTube because it didn't crash this week. It's a freaking miracle. Watch this on YouTube or listen to this on podcast. Thank you so very much on YouTube. Remember, subscribe, like the video, hit the bell notifications, all that stuff. If you listen to this on podcast, remember 4 things I ask every week. Number 1, please, please, please subscribe or follow on Apple. Apple likes to be weird. Subscribe or follow. Once you've done that, please rate this podcast. I'll accept, well, 5 stars. Come on. I'll accept 4. 3 and below. We probably need to have a conversation. Follow me on Twitter at Fake Tyler Morgan. And once there, my DMs are open. You can discuss why you felt you need to give me 3 or below. Remember, if you're nice, I'll appreciate it. If you are rude or insulting, anything like that, I will make fun of you. It's what I do. Once you have rated the show, please review it. Step number 3, write a review. Say something nice about the show. Embellish a little, but don't get carried away. If you have some commentary that's you want to be constructive, I'll accept constructive criticism. Love constructive criticism because, hey, everyone wants to be better. But if you say something like, I talk about myself too much, or I'm the wannabe Alex Jones, believe me, I will bring it up forever. Just ask the guy who said that. Anyways, once you have subscribed, rated, and reviewed, last thing I ask that you share this episode, send it to someone who you think will absolutely enjoy it. Or, better yet, send it to someone who you think will be absolutely pissed off by this. Hate and discontent. I love to share it. Love it. Send it to someone who will start hearing this. Go, oh, he's going to talk about Tim Walz. Oh my God, talk about Tim Walz. That will make my day. If a head explodes from listening to this show, I've done my part. Thank you again so much for listening. And as always, stay relentless. The Tyler Morgan Show is a relentless daring media production. The Tyler Morgan Show is supported by its listeners. To support the show, go to ko-fi.com/Tyler Morgan Show to donate there, or relentlessdaring.com and hit the donate button at the top of the page to set up your donation. All music used in the Tyler Morgan Show is used with permission from purpleplanet.com, link in the show notes. 2 Timothy 1:7.